So a couple of weeks ago, we went over a preview of what circle casting, the new mechanic for 5th edition, was going to look like. But at the time, we didn't have the full details. Well, today, Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun is officially out, and we have all of the details, so let's go over everything that you need to know about circle casting. Plus, we're also going to go over all 4 of the new spells in the book that have specific circle casting effects, so let's get straight into it. Before we do though, I'm trying to see how close I can get to 25,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you like what I do and want to support me, as I've got tons more coverage coming for both of the new Forgotten Realms books, including discussions about the new subclasses, backgrounds, feats, and the rest of the spells, and even so much more. So with that in mind, a sub to the channel and clicking the like button while you're there helps way more than you probably realize. Thank you. First up, in order to be able to circle cast a spell, the only requirement is that you have either the spellcasting or Pact Magic feature. That's it. There's no level requirement and there's no feat that you need to take either. This essentially means that even level 1 casters can take advantage of this potentially incredibly powerful effect. I feel a bit conflicted on that. On the one hand, it's incredibly cool and can enable some amazing moments, but it also feels like something that makes more sense to be gated at least to a certain level. But I mean, here we are. This also means that even a fighter or any other class can just take a single level dip in any class with spellcasting, or warlock for that matter, to be able to contribute to a circle cast, which feels a bit weird to me. I don't often advocate for things having more restrictions on them, but with this, I kind of wish I did have a little bit more. So, what is circle casting? Basically, it lets multiple spellcasters work together to augment or empower a spell by working together during the casting of that spell. Any spell in the game that has a casting time of 1 action or 1 minute or longer can be circle cast. To do so, the person that initiates the casting is called the primary caster, and they get to decide the targets of the spell, need to maintain concentration if necessary, provide any material components, expend a spell slot, and make any other decisions about the spell's casting, such as if a specific damage type is required to be chosen. To initiate a circle cast, the primary caster takes the magic action on their turn, makes all the selections that we just mentioned before, and also maintains concentration on the spell until the circle cast is complete, regardless of whether or not the spell requires concentration. It's important to note that at this stage, no spell slot or material components are expended. That only happens once the casting has been completed. After the casting has been initiated, any number of secondary casters may contribute to the spell. In order to do so, they must be within 30 feet of the primary caster and take the magic action on their turn, and also maintain concentration until the casting is completed. If any of the secondary casters has their concentration broken, the casting fails. The casting completes as soon as the final secondary caster takes the magic action on their turn, so it doesn't even need to get back to the primary caster. It's also worth noting that the primary caster gets to decide who the final secondary caster will be, so in theory, they could decide to cut it short and just release the spell at any moment when they see fit. In any case, as soon as the final secondary caster has taken the magic action on their turn, the spell goes off and unleashes its normal effect, plus whatever bonus has been added through circle casting. So what are the options? Let's take a look. First is Augment. The way that it works is that provided a spell has a range of at least 5 feet, so touch spells do not apply, we can increase the range by 1,000 feet per secondary caster up to a maximum of 1 mile. Now, I did have to look this up because I'm Canadian and I don't know what a mile is, but it turns out that it's 5,280 feet, which does technically mean that you would need 6 secondary casters to get the full mile range, even though that last one is only contributing 280 feet. For my fellow Canadians, 1 mile is approximately 26 hockey rinks. Anyway, this can make for some insanely long distance attacks on castles or other keeps and bases. Like all of these options, it's very much worth pointing out that it can be used against the players and their cities, which I think is one of the most exciting parts of this new mechanic. Next up is Distribute, which makes it so that for any spell requiring concentration, the mental strain of maintaining that concentration can be spread among every secondary caster. A few things worth noting are that it does not appear that the secondary casters need to maintain that 30-foot distance to the primary caster once the initial casting is completed, which is very good. It also only requires that one of the casters maintains concentration, so even if a bunch drop it, as long as one is holding on, it still works. Having thought about this one since the preview video and now getting all of the details, I think I actually understand what the best opportunity for this one is. It can essentially let a caster who does not have access to a certain spell maintain concentration on it for you while you go ahead and do something else. Since only one of the casters needs to maintain concentration, you can circle cast it, drop concentration, and then do something else on your turn, even another concentration spell, while someone else is maintaining concentration on this one for you. Again, even if they don't have that spell on their spell list. This can enable some pretty wacky combos for sure, so let me know in the comments what jumps to mind for you. Next up is Expand, which lets us increase the area of effect of a given spell. For each secondary caster that contributes to the spell, you can increase the AoE by 10 feet. So for example, if you cast Fireball, which typically has a 20-foot radius, with 2 secondary casters, it becomes a 40-foot radius. Line spells are a bit of a weird one since you need to decide which dimension gets extended. Lightning Bolt, for example, is 100 feet long and 5 feet wide. By using Expand, we get to decide whether to make it wider or longer. So again, with 2 secondary casters, you could make it 25 feet wide or 120 feet long. Obviously, increasing the blast radius of any spell is going to be potentially very strong. But I think line spells stand to gain the most from this, since they are generally more hard to use because of how narrow they often are. The obvious concern here is to be wary of spells that don't allow you to select your targets, since allies can be more susceptible to your damage with larger AoEs. Of course, if you're just dropping bombs on an enemy encampment though, maybe that doesn't matter so much. The other critical thing to note for Expand is that each secondary caster must also expend a spell slot. It does not specify that it needs to be of the same level or higher, so presumably it doesn't matter. They could just use like a first level spell to expand a Fireball. Next up is Prolong. Provided that we are casting a spell with a duration of 1 minute or longer, we can increase the duration of that spell depending on the number of secondary casters that contribute. The strange thing is that each contributor does not necessarily increase the time. There are brackets. Also, each secondary caster must again expend a spell slot. So for 1 to 3 secondary casters, the duration is extended by 1 hour. For 4 to 6, it's extended by 8 hours, and for 7 or more casters, it's extended by 24 hours. A few things to note here, it is extended by and not extended to, which is a very big difference. But also, it is just a bit odd that you're going to be gaining 0 benefit for adding casters in certain instances. I do fully appreciate that increasing the duration of spells can be insanely powerful, but it is still strange that whether you have 1, 2, or 3 secondary casters, it's the same duration, and then again for 4, 5, and 6. Next up is Safeguard, which allows us to create pockets of safety within the area of effect of a spell. Those safe zones are completely unaffected by the spell. You can create an amount of safe zones equal to your spellcasting modifier plus the amount of secondary casters that contributed to the spell. The safe zones are designated as cubes of 5 feet, and they can be in any permutation that you want, but they do all need to be contiguous with at least one other cube. This does create some limitations in the protectiveness based on the size of the area. Importantly, if the spell area is something that moves, the safe zones move with it. I suspect that this will be one of the lesser chosen options, but it can definitely have plenty of great applications. And finally, we have Supplant. This lets us reduce the material component cost by 50 gold for every secondary caster contributing to the spell. So if you can find 500 casters, you could in theory cast True Resurrection for free. This is an interesting one because since it is only reducing it by 50 gold per secondary caster, on a percentage basis, it's way more effective on lower level spells and less expensive spells by extension. Things like Revivify, which you could potentially cast for pretty close to free every single time. But when you'd most likely want to use it would be for those massive expensive casts like something like True Resurrection, but then you'd need a ludicrous amount of people to make it work. That said, it could be pretty cool to rock up to a Wizard Academy or something and have them all help you out. Who knows? In campaigns that are very resource starved though, this could definitely be a very big boon. Overall, I think this is a super cool mechanic, and I'm so excited to see it being brought forth into the game. It creates so many new opportunities for creativity, and I can't wait to see the different ways that people change it and adjust it as well. But that's not all we're doing today, because on top of those 6 options that you get to choose whenever you cast any spell, we were also provided with 4 new spells that have built-in special effects when they are circle cast. So let's take a look at each of them. And if you plan to use circle casting or any spell casting in your games for that matter, this video sponsor DSCRYB has you covered. With evocative and engaging descriptions of magic, rituals, and other types of spells being cast, to detailed maps, sound effects, and music, and the perfect way to put it all together using their integrated scene builder, Opus, DSCRYB has everything that a dungeon master needs to emotionally charge any moment of a session. Whether you're playing in person or online, these tools are so easy to use and will dramatically enhance your game. Plus, nothing was made with AI. So check out my link in the description and the pinned comment below to extend the duration of your free trial from 2 weeks to a full month. Thanks again to DSCRYB for sponsoring this video. First up is Dirge. This is a 6th level enchantment spell available to bards and clerics. It has a casting time of 1 action, a range of self, requires only verbal components, and concentration for up to 1 minute. The way it works is that when cast, you gain a 60-foot emanation. You can designate any number of creatures to be unaffected by the spell when you cast it. This is obviously great. Any creature that is affected by it is unable to regain hit points while they are within the emanation. Additionally, whenever the emanation enters a creature's space, or a creature enters the space of the emanation or ends its turn there, it needs to make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, it takes 3d10 necrotic damage and is knocked prone. On a successful save, it takes half as much and has its speed halved. On the face of it, this is not looking like a particularly great spell. Level 6 for 3d10 necrotic damage tied to a con save is a bad rate and is a tough sell. I will say that the enormous radius of it and the fact that it doesn't affect allies does make it look much more appealing though. The question then really becomes, how many enemies are you hitting, or I guess, how far are they? Healing isn't something that a ton of creatures do innately, and it isn't often that enemies are consuming potions. That said, the spell does gain a specific bonus for being circle cast, so let's look at that. In order to circle cast Dirge as a circle spell, it requires at least 2 secondary casters. Doing so also increases the duration to 10 minutes with concentration. On top of that, a creature that fails its save against a spell now also gains a level of exhaustion. While exhausted, it does not recover hit points during a long rest, nor does it remove a level of exhaustion during that same long rest. This potentially means that for a massive big bad who escapes and runs away to try and heal, assuming it has no way to clear a level of exhaustion, you could potentially kill it over multiple encounters with just 6 failed saves against a spell without dealing much damage to it at all, which is actually pretty cool. But I mean, legendary resistance does exist. Back to circle casting though, each of the secondary casters must expend a spell slot of at least level 4 or higher. This is a lot. There is actually a lot of power buried in here, but I don't think the spell really stands on its own. I think it needs to be circle cast to be effective, but that's also going to be really expensive. We'll have to see how this plays out once we get some more opportunities to use it, but it can also be a great spell to be used against the party. Next up is Doomtide, which is a 4th level spell available to bards, clerics, and warlocks. It's 1 action to cast, has a range of 120 feet, requires verbal, somatic, and material components, and concentration for up to 1 minute. When cast, it creates a 20-foot radius sphere of inky fog that creates magical darkness. Each creature that is in the sphere when it appears, or when the sphere moves into its space, needs to make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 5d6 psychic damage and subtracts 1d6 from its saving throws until the end of its next turn, meaning that it will need to make its subsequent save while under the effect of the spell. On a successful save, the creature takes half damage only. The sphere also moves 10 feet away from you at the start of each of your turns, which means that you can direct it depending on how you move as well. I'd say that Doomtide is a reasonable cast even without circle casting. The debuff on all saving throws is pretty nice, and it creates some darkness and deals some damage. It's nothing astounding, but it's good. Then, to circle cast it, it requires a minimum of 5 secondary casters, each of which must expend a level 3 or higher spell slot. And in addition to the other components, you also need to provide a special string of 3 pearls from Pandemonium, which the spell then consumes. This is going to be pretty difficult to guess unless you happen to know a guy that sells precious gems from the outer planes. Anyway, assuming you can manage that, it does remove concentration from the spell and has it last until it is dispelled, and increases the range to 1 mile. The spell will also end if any of the casters contribute to another casting of Doomtide. I'll be honest, this one really feels like a BBEG spell for the DM to use. Sure, a player could conceivably obtain 3 pearls from Pandemonium, but if the big bad is some extraplanar entity, it would be so much easier to explain away the fact that it just kinda has them. I love the kinds of scenarios a spell like this can create. You can so easily envision this plague or sickness wafting through a town, and the heroes need to find a way to stop it. Next up we have Songal's Elemental Suffusion, which is a 5th level spell available to druids, sorcerers, and wizards, has a casting time of 1 action, has a range of self, and requires verbal, somatic, and material components, specifically a pearl worth at least 100 gold. Additionally, it also requires concentration for up to 1 minute. When you cast a spell, you get multiple effects. Firstly, you get 1 resistance of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. You can also, when the spell is cast and at the start of each subsequent turn, unleash a burst of elemental energy dealing 2d6 of any of the same damage types from earlier, though it does not need to be the same type that you chose as your resistance. Most importantly, this damage does not require the expenditure of an action or bonus action. Creatures of your choice within a 15-foot emanation just have to make a dexterity save, failing which they take the 2d6 damage and are knocked prone. And finally, you also get a 30-foot fly speed and can hover. This is a complicated spell to evaluate. It gives so much value. Few spells give a resistance, some damage, and mobility, so from that lens, it's really good. Especially since the damage does not require any additional action or bonus action. You can just continue to do whatever you want it to do anyway. And fly speed is just always great. The core issue being that it is concentration, so if you are within 15 feet, to make the damage burst effective, you're likely pretty close, which is kinda dangerous. That said, you can now fly, so if the enemy you're fighting doesn't have ranged attacks, you could just fly over them. It's a weird one. My gut says that it is pretty good, but I'll need a bit more time to come to a full conclusion. Let me know your thoughts about it though in the comments. But then, it also does get some specific bonuses when it is circle cast. If circle cast, the casting time increases from 1 action to 1 minute, meaning you essentially cannot do it during combat anymore. You would need to set it up before. In recognition of that, the duration does also increase to 10 minutes, but does still require your concentration. Then for each secondary caster, who also needs to expend a spell slot of level 2 or higher, you can choose an additional creature to gain the benefits of the spell to a maximum of 9. I think circle casting Elemental Suffusion puts it from probably an okay but kinda questionable spell to quite strong. You can turn your whole party into flying blast waves that also have resistances. It's particularly good for marshals who are expecting to be up close anyway, but more importantly, those marshals being close doesn't risk concentration being broken, which makes it even better. And yeah, it is only 2d6 damage, but it's functionally free from an action economy standpoint. And if there's a few allies that all have it and are close to each other, the enemies can take the damage multiple times per round. I'm not going to say this is like S tier or anything, but I think there are plenty of cases where it could be a great pick. And our final spell to look at is Spellfire Storm. This is a 4th level spell available to sorcerers and wizards. It has a casting time of 1 action, has a range of 60 feet, and requires both verbal and somatic components, and concentration for up to 1 minute. When cast, it conjures a 20-foot radius and 20-foot high cylinder, which sheds bright light. And when you cast the spell, you can designate creatures that are not affected by it. Creatures that are affected by it and are within the radius need to make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 4d10 radiant damage or half as much on a successful one. They also make the save if they enter the area for the first time on a turn or end their turn there. Additionally, if a creature within the cylinder tries to cast a spell, they also need to make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the spell fails and whatever action, bonus action, or reaction they use to cast it is wasted. Though if it was cast with a spell slot, that is not wasted. This spell feels pretty situational. Ideally, you'd want to know that you've hit a spellcaster to make this really worth it, but you'd also want some way to impair movement to prevent them from just walking out of it, which isn't particularly hard to do since no part of the cylinder is farther than 20 feet away from an exit. In a perfect world, you land it on a caster, they don't realize the effect, and then they try to cast a spell. They fail their save, and then on their next turn, they just move away. That's fine. But there are other and cheaper spells that you can use if your goal is to just deprive an action. Granted, this does come with some damage though. On its own, I don't think it's particularly good. Flashy, absolutely. But let's see if circle casting changes anything. To circle cast it, you need to provide a blue star sapphire worth 25,000 gold pieces that the spell consumes, and each secondary caster must also expend a spell slot of level 3 or higher. The benefit being that the range of the spell increases now to 1 mile and no longer requires concentration. This makes it even more bizarre since if you're like a mile away from the target caster, it's probably even easier for them to just walk away. Again, I think the real case here for this spell is from a big bad perspective. If they can justifiably have that many 25,000 gold beast sapphires, you could just have them rain down like 10 of these on a city, dealing tons of damage and preventing magic from being used in a reasonably large area. Ultimately, I think the spells that have specific circle casting rules are not really designed to be cast without circle casting. That is to say that without it, I don't think most of them are very good. And this does kind of make sense. They made a spell that's probably on the lower end of passable at its given level, but then when used with circle casting, could potentially far exceed the capabilities for its level. It's a very interesting experiment that we're only starting to see unfold now. Like I mentioned a few other times in this video already, I do think that the bulk of these specific options are probably better from the DM perspective to launch these large-scale, terrifying, and powerful effects on a village or a town. They can fundamentally reshape the way that some campaigns are designed and can be especially impactful at higher level D&D, which is very cool. I've been advocating for such a long time to create support for higher level games, and mechanics like this indirectly do exactly that, which is so cool to see. So that's it. Let me know your thoughts about circle casting and the 4 new spells that we got here. I've got tons more coverage coming from both of the new Forgotten Realms books, including discussions about the new subclasses, backgrounds, feats, the rest of the spells, monsters, and so much more. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.